and Development Alternative Measures Chapter highlights 1. Gross National Happiness, GNH 2. Purchasing Power Parity, PPP 3. Big Mac Index 4. Public, Merit, and Demerit Goods Introduction. The concept of Gross Domestic Product, GDP, along with its sister concepts of GNP and GVA, are almost a century old. The reasons they are still in use are because they are simple and have global comparison value. However, GDP does have its shortcomings when it comes to measuring progress, as witnessed in the previous chapter. Apart from that, it also contorts our comprehension of growth. The following examples explain the point. Increasing crime rates can raise GDP by elevating disbursement on security personnel and technology. In spite of the degradation brought by the oil spills, it increases GDP as cleanup operations add to hiring and purchasing of services and equipment. Sale of ammunition, such as guns, magnifies GDP. People buy guns because of increasing crime rates. Sale of masks during the pandemic also led to a rise in GDP. Unsustainable commercial agricultural production raised GDP even when it is unsustainable. Multiple substitute measures have arisen to encapsulate not only the quantitative side of growth, but also the qualitative aspects of progress. The substitute measures calibrate quantitative growth to the qualitative aspects. For instance, if growth does not influence all social groups equilaterally, value is reduced. The substitute measures are listed as follows: UN Human Development Index, HDI, Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index, Social Progress Index, SPI, Genuine Progress Index, Gross National Happiness, a GNH, Happiness Index, Green GDP 371243L. Sriram's IAS Fact Check in 1990, UN Human Development Index, HDI, was developed by Pakistani economist Mohib ul Haq under the assistance of a Marchi senator. It has been in use since 1993, and it is used by the United Nations Development Programme. In its annual report, the HDI measures the average accomplishments of a country in a three-dimensional model of human development, elaborated as follows: a wholesome, long, and healthy life, as measured by life expectancy at birth. Assessment of knowledge, measured in terms of adult literacy rate, and the combined primary, secondary, and tertiary gross enrollment ratio. A fair standard of living, assessed by gross domestic product, GDP, per capita at purchasing power parity, PPP, in US dollars. Every year, listing and ranking of UN member states takes place according to these measures. Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index, IHDI, was released for the first time in the 2010 Human Development Report, which includes inequalities in the three basic dimensions of human development, income, life expectancy, and education, and modifies the HDI accordingly. India ranked 131 out of 189 nations on the Human Development Index, HDI, in 2020. India's HDI value rose from 0.427 to 0.640 between 1990 and 2017, denoting an increase of nearly 50%, also indicating the country's extraordinary achievement in elevate millions of people out of poverty. Fact check: the life expectancy at birth in India increased by approximately 11 years between 1990 and 2017, with even more significant gains in expected years of schooling. PHDI. The 30th anniversary edition of the Human Development Report, titled The Next Frontier, Human Development and the Anthropocene, brings to the fore an experimental new lens to its annual Human Development Index, HDI, by modifying the HDI, which assesses a nation's health, education, and standards of living, to incorporate two more elements: a country's carbon dioxide and material footprints. The index demonstrates how the global development landscape would transform if the well-being of people and also the planet were vital to defining humanity's progress. The Planetary Pressures Adjusted Human Development Index, PHDI, is defined as an experimental index that modifies the Human Development Index, HDI, for planetary pressures in the Anthropocene. The PHDI deducts the HDI for pressures on the planet to contemplate a concern for intergenerational inequality. The PHDI assesses the level of human development modified by carbon dioxide emissions per person, production-based, and material footprint per capita to note the excessive human pressure on the planet. It should be perceived as a stimulant for transformation. 38. 1243. C. Sriram's has. Scientists think that for the first time, instead of the planet shaping humans, humans are knowingly shaping the planet for their self-centered needs artificially. Be it the climate crisis, biodiversity collapse, ocean acidification. This is termed as the Anthropocene, the age of humans, a new geologic epoch. With the PHDI, a new global picture comes into play, painting an accurate assessment of human progress. The index captures the HDI of a country, after adjusting for its carbon dioxide emissions per person and material footprint per person. Without any carbon emissions and material footprint, the HDI and PHDI would be equal. The greater these factors are, the greater the difference between the two. For instance, approximately more than 50 countries drop from the very high human development group, representing their reliance on fossil fuels and material footprint. India has PHDI of 111, which is 20 ranks higher than its HDI, thus showing our impressive efforts in reversing climate change. Snippets. Ideally, the FD equals the HDI if there are no pressures on the planet. As pressures rise, the FD trails the HDI. Snippets. India ranks 111 in the FD, which is the medium human development trans loss category. Pandemic and HDI. The COVID-19 pandemic has set loose a human development catastrophe. Conditions today are equivalent to levels of deprivation last seen in the mid-1980s, when compared on some dimensions of human development, but the crisis is impacting all of human development's constitutive elements: income, with a sizable decline in economic activity since the Great Depression; health, death toll over 300,000 and incidentally leading to an additional 6,000 child deaths every day from preventable causes over the next 6 months; and education, with effective out-of-school rates taking into account the internet inaccessibility in primary education anticipated to fall to the levels of actual rates of the mid-1980s levels. Not counting imperceptible indirect effects, including increased domestic violence, is yet to be fully documented. India's ranking is likely to suffer quite significantly currently, in 2021, and also after for a few years. Genuine Progress Indicator, GPI. Redefining progress is the brainchild of the United States of America that formulated a new measure to evaluate national progress. It is also known as the Genuine Progress Indicator, GPI. It is a productivity metric that is invented to take all-inclusive account of the well-being of a nation extending beyond the size of the nation's economy by integrating environmental and social factors that are not assessed by GDP. 39. C. CCC GCCC 1244, Sriram's IAS snippets, GPI, deducts environmental costs of economic activity like biodiversity loss. Resource depletion, pollution, loss of farmland and wetlands, and ozone depletion and social costs like increase in crime and family breakdown. Social Progress Index is similar to the GPI, as it includes social and environmental factors for economic growth to arrive at an indicator of progress. The indicators are different in number and weight, but the basic thrust is the same. The index is published by the nonprofit Social Progress Imperative and is based on the writings of Amartya Sen and Joseph Stiglitz. The index has 3 aspects: basic human needs, foundations of well-being, opportunity. The above 3 broad heads include health, sanitation, personal safety, ecosystem sustainability, shelter, access to knowledge, personal rights, and tolerance and inclusion. The 2020 report shows the following findings. Findings: in general, the world is improving. Since 2014, the world average score increased from 60.63 to 64.24, and there has been improvement on 8 of 12 components of social progress. Despite this overall progress, personal rights and inclusiveness have declined since 2011, while the world has stagnated on environmental quality and personal safety. Norway ranks first in the world on social progress with a score of 92.72. Pandemic will turn the clock of development back by many years unless managed well. Gross national happiness, GNH. GNH is an attempt to define quality of life in more holistic terms than gross national product. The term was coined by Bhutan's former king Jigme Wangchuk. While conventional development models stress economic growth as the ultimate objective, the concept of GNH is based on the premise that true development takes place when the following 4 dimensions are fulfilled in the right measure. 1. Equitable and sustainable socioeconomic development. 2. Preservation and promotion of cultural values. 3. Conservation of the natural environment. 4. Good governance. 4012-44, Sriram's IAS Happiness Index Sustainable Development Solutions Network to help nations make their public policies for the happiness of their people. It is inspired by the GNH of Bhutan. The first World Happiness Report was released in 2012. 6 key variables are the basis to assess well-being: income, healthy life expectancy, social support, freedom, trust and generosity. The entire top 10 were wealthier, developed nations. Yet, money is not the only ingredient in the recipe for happiness. In fact, among the wealthier countries, the differences in happiness levels had a lot to do with differences in mental health, physical health and personal relationships. The biggest single source of misery is mental illness. Few factors that are strikingly different in the report are generosity, social support and so on. Snippets. The World Happiness Report is a measure of happiness published by the United Nations. Fact check. The World Happiness Report 2020 ranked 156 countries by their happiness levels. Finland is the world's happiest country, followed by Denmark and Switzerland. Indian states and happiness. Madhya Pradesh became the first state to set up a happiness department. Andhra Pradesh was the second state to do so. Madhya Pradesh set up an Anand department made up by members for working in the areas of culture, society, psychology and academia. It started happiness festivals helping people to be happy through folk music, dance, singing, drama and sports and traditional activities. It also created Anand clubs for people to form self-help groups in their local communities where skills to live a happy life could be taught and shared among members. It placed India in the 144th position. Data was compiled from surveys. The OECD Better Life Index, it was adopted by the Club of Rich Countries. Organization for Economic Co-operation and Development, OECD, in 2011 and takes the best metrics of well-being based on the recommendations of the Commission on the Measurement of Economic Performance and Social Progress, 2009. It includes 11 dimensions of well-being: housing conditions and expenditure, example, real estate pricing, income, household income and financial wealth, medium black circle jobs, earnings, job security and unemployment, community, quality of social support network, education, and what one gets out of it. 4112-44, Sriram's IAS environment, quality of environment, example, environmental health. Governance, involvement in democracy, health, life satisfaction, level of happiness, safety, murder and assault rates, work-life balance. Green GDP, green gross domestic product. A green GDP is an index of economic growth which factors in the environmental consequences of the growth. From the final value of goods and services produced, the cost of ecological degradation is deducted to arrive at green GDP. In 2004, China announced that the green GDP index would replace the Chinese GDP index. But the effort was dropped as green GDP figures shrank the size of the GDP to unimpressive levels. Economics of Biodiversity, or the Dasgupta Review. The Dasgupta Review, 2021, is an independent, global assessment on the economics of biodiversity led by Professor Sir Partha Dasgupta. The review shows that most governments are prioritizing unsustainable economic activities and paying people more to exploit nature than to protect it. The total cost of subsidies that damage nature is estimated to be as high as $6 trillion annually. For example, fossil fuels. The review calls for changes in how we think, act and measure economic success to protect and enhance our prosperity and the natural world. Grounded in a deep understanding of ecosystem processes and how they are affected by economic activity, the new framework presented sets out how we should account for nature in economics and decision-making. The review recommends discouraging damaging forms of production and consumption through policies that change prices and behaviors, for example enforcing standards for reuse and recycling. Snippets. Commissioned in 2019 by UK, the review is expected to shape the UK government's environmental agenda for the next 25 years. Natural resources accounting and green GDP. Natural resources are the natural capital that include biodiversity, soil, water and air. They support one another. There is a widespread recognition that natural capital should be of the same importance as man-made capital in accounting terms, so that the ability to generate income in the future is sustained by the judicious use of the stock of natural capital. By failing to account for reductions in 42. 1245. Sriram's Las. The stock of natural resources, standard measures of national income, do not represent economic growth genuinely. The National Biodiversity Action Plan published by the Government of India, Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change in 2008 highlighted the value of goods and services provided by biodiversity. The aim of the action plan is to assign appropriate market value to the goods and services provided by various ecosystems and to strive to incorporate these costs into national accounting. In the year 2010, at Nagoya, Japan, meet on biodiversity protection, India declared that it will adopt natural resource accounting. The 2010 UN Biodiversity Summit decided to respect the link between economic policy, natural capital, and human well-being, and that there should be global partnership to mainstream natural resources accounting into economic planning. An expert group headed by Partha Dasgupta was convened in 2011 to examine the prospects of developing green national accounts in India. It submitted its report in 2013. Commission on the Measurement of Economic Performance and Social Progress, CMEPS. The Commission on the Measurement of Economic Performance and Social Progress, CMEPSP, under Joseph Stiglitz, was set up by the French government in 2008 to examine how the wealth and social progress of a nation could be measured and if alternatives to GDP could be developed. The final report was published in 2009. It critiqued GDP as a measure of progress and demanded items like leisure to be included in any metric of social progress. Purchasing power parity, PPP. The value of the GDP of a country is estimated in domestic currency. It is the Indian rupee in the case of India. But the same can be expressed in terms of another currency, for example, US dollar. For this, the rupee value of GDP is converted into USS at the prevailing exchange rate, or the average rate in a given year. For example, about 73 in the calendar year 2020 is the number of rupees that made a US dollar. But many critics of this method question the factors behind the exchange rate of rupee in relation to the dollar in the market. Markets decide the rate based on a variety of factors like net foreign currency inflows, forex reserves, growth rate of the economy and its prospects, dependence of the economy on global supplies, and the price behavior of the latter, and so on. If these factors are favorable, the currency strengthens, that is, it appreciates. It means less rupees per dollar. However, there's so much speculation in the forex markets that the market rate is far from what it should be, in the opinion of the critics of the market price of foreign currency. 43. 1245. Sriram's IAS. A basket of tradable goods and services and their values in rupees and dollars are taken. Based on these values, a parity is set. This is the true exchange rate, because it is reflected in the market value of goods and services. Snippets. In order to arrive at a more genuine rate of exchange, a method called purchasing power parity, PPP, is used. It is arrived at by comparing the purchasing power of two currencies, say the Indian rupee and USS. PPP exchange rates are useful for comparing living standards between countries. Actual exchange rates can give a very misleading picture of living standards. Suppose the rupee fell in relation to the USS. At the diminished market rate of conversion, India's GDP falls in terms of dollars, and so does its per capita income. However, the market exchange rate might not reflect ground level conditions equally or anywhere near, because the quality of living standards may not have dropped in India at an equal rate. The market exchange rate does not consider the purchasing power of a currency with regard to goods and services domestically like a mirror effect. Using PPP exchange rates for assessing income in multiple countries helps avoid this problem. PPP gives a poverty estimate and is used by the United Nations in creating the Human Development Index. By PPP basis, in terms of GDP, India stands third in the world with $8.9 trillion in 2020. China ranks first with $24.3 trillion, while the USA ranks second with $20.9 trillion. This denotes that the above-mentioned US currency would be required to purchase all goods and services manufactured in the country in 2020. India's economy in 2020 was valued at $2.6 trillion by the market conversion rate, according to the International Monetary Fund's World Economic Outlook, WEO. India ranks as the sixth largest country in terms of gross domestic product. The United States boasts of the highest GDP, $20.9 trillion, followed by China, $14.7 trillion, and Japan, $5.0 trillion. Interestingly, US GDP is placed at a higher value by market rate than by PPP, as the global confidence is more in the USS than its real strength. It is in contrast with Chinese yuan. Fact check. India reported a GDP of $2.6 trillion for 2020, as per the International Monetary Fund data. Big Mac Index. The Economist magazine of London developed the Big Mac Index. Based on PPP, it demonstrates the equality of any two currencies, for example, between Indian rupee and the US dollar, on the basis of their purchasing power of a particular variety of hamburgers sold by McDonald's called Big Mac in America and Maharaja Mac in India. The equality generally comes out to be around 20 to 25. 44. 1246. Sriram's has rupees per dollar, hence, the rupee is seen to be grossly undervalued at its exchange rate value. An advantage with PPP is that it correlates with the ground level value of the currency in India and does not change in a volatile manner. Developed, developing, and least developed countries. Countries can be classified on the basis of criteria like GDP, HDI, infrastructure, level of industrialization, and standard of living. If the above-mentioned criteria are already in an advanced stage of development, the country is deemed to be developed. Post-industrial economies are a part of developed countries. Service sector is extensively developed and forms a predominant portion of the GDP. An underdeveloped industrial and infrastructural base is a characteristic of a developing country or underdeveloped country, although there may be small areas of development, low standard of living, low HDI, high demographic growth, and so on. Developing countries, the ones that opened up economies in the 90s or later and are rapidly undergoing urbanization, like India, are classified as newly industrialized countries, NIC. The developed and developing countries lie someplace between them. Given their strong economic growth rates and future potential, NICs are attractive investment destinations. World Bank classification. On the basis of the per capita income, World Bank classifies countries as shown below. Category. Per capita, current USS, low income 1,005, lower middle income 1,006 to 3.955, upper middle income 3,956 to 12,235, high income 12,235. Although all developed countries have a high per capita income, a high income country need not be a developed country. As per the United Nations, for instance, some high income countries might also be categorized as developing countries. For example, the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, countries are classified as developing high income countries. GCC countries, although rich, are not developed. They have small areas of export economy that is based on oil and gas, and the remainder of the economy is underdeveloped. 45-12-46 Sriram's last snippets. As per the World Bank, high-income economy is defined as a country with a per capita income of US $12.235 or more in 2017. Least developed countries, LDCs. As per the United Nations, a country classifies as a LDC if it meets the below mentioned three criteria. Poverty. Per capita income less than $1,035. Human resource fragility, based on the indicators of nutrition, health, education, and adult literacy. Economic sensitivity, based on the instability of agricultural production. Economic importance of non-traditional activities, instability of exports of goods and services, merchandise export concentration, the percentage of population displaced by natural disasters, and handicap of economic smallness. 3. S. Snippets LDC criteria undergo revision every 3 years. Currently, 47 countries are in the list of LDCs. Public, merit and demerit goods. JAS. The two classes of goods in an economy are public goods and private goods. Public goods are characterized as non-excludable and non-rivalrous. Non-rivalry is defined as one person's pleasure of a good not diminishing the ability of other people to enjoy the same good. For instance, streetlights, municipal park and public roads. Non-excludable means that people cannot be prevented from enjoying the good. An example of a public good is air quality. Private goods are oxygen cylinder or gas masks. National defense is also non-excludable. No one can be excluded, and everyone in the country is protected. The government provides public goods, markets do not manufacture them. 3. There are also merit, non-merit and demerit goods. Merit goods are subsidized by the government. For example, fertilizers and seeds for small and marginal farmers and food for low-income groups. Non-merit goods are almost not worthy of subsidies. The government is not in a position to make them affordable for public consumption for fiscal or financial reasons, even though they are important. For instance, college-level education. Demerit goods are the ones whose consumption needs to be put off, as they are unhealthy for the consumers, as well as society at large. For example, tobacco, alcohol, etc. They are highly taxed because it might not be feasible to ban them. 46.